Tracey Jackson has served in a variety of roles, from a recruiter for the city of Wilmington to a talent acquisition executive with Verizon Wireless in Georgia, Alabama, and North Carolina, to running her own consulting business in Wilmington. She also is leading the Wilmington Chamber's recently formed African American Business Council. Tracey will talk today about intentional inclusion. Please join me in welcoming Tracey to the stage.
Good morning. I'd like to start today with a history lesson, a history of Wilmington. And I actually want to start in 1897. In 1897, that was the year blacks were the majority of this community. We were 55% of the population. And that's when black and white business owners, they worked together, we lived together, and we were growing this community together. 30% of our population of skilled craftsmen were black. 10 of the 11 restaurants in our town were owned by blacks. 90% of all of our barbershops were black-owned. And Wilmington housed one of the very few black publications in the state, and the only daily publication in our country. And then there was 1898. That's when a few select white men decided they did not like this type of community alignment and unity and set out to separate it. They wrote what was called the White Declaration of Independence. And in this White Declaration of Independence, it stated, the city of Wilmington and New Hanover County will no longer be ruled and never be ruled again by anyone of African origin. This set out some of the worst race riots in our country and definitely the worst in our state. Black business leaders were killed, or their businesses were burned and taken over by whites. And our black business leaders were run out of town in fear for their lives. That was 1898. It was the year I personally call the year of the intentional divide. It was the darkest period in Wilmington's history. The ramifications of this type of an intentional divide do not go away with the passage of time or because we don't talk about it. The aura, the feeling, the vibe of this type of intentional divide still lingers in our community today. I know we can't rewrite history. However, we can be on the right side of writing today's history. We all know about Martin Luther King and his dream for his 4 little children, that they will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I too have a dream for my 2 adult sons, that they will one day be able to live in a Wilmington where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And I'm gonna need your help to make my dream come true. Help me create a Wilmington where my 2 sons will actually want to live, work, grow, and raise a family. Recently, my youngest son was home for Thanksgiving and said something to me that just broke my heart. He's 24 years old. He was visiting from Georgia. He came in, plopped down on the couch and says, "Gosh, Mom, I couldn't live in Wilmington, and I don't even like to stay here long." He said, "It's something about the town. It's something about the way it makes me feel. It's something about the vibe." And unfortunately, me and so many blacks like me know what he felt. It was the lingering effect of the vibe of the intentional divide. So again, I ask you, help me create a Wilmington where it's not so difficult to be black and raise a family. Help me help those individuals who find it so difficult to become a part of this community, they're ready to pack up their families and move to more inclusionary towns. Let me give you a little perspective on just the daily life of that type of an intentional divide. How many of you woke up this morning thinking about the color of your skin? Probably not many of you. Unfortunately, the color of your skin is a constant consideration for most blacks. Change is hard. We can all agree with that, but it can be done. It takes a willingness to engage the issue and a conscious effort to want to see the change happen. And the type of conscious effort I want to speak with you about today is being intentionally inclusive. That is, making intentional inclusion a part of your daily routine. It's a constant awareness of what I call the 3 Ps. That's your position, your power, and your privilege. That's a constant awareness of your majority position and being intentionally inclusive with the power that comes with that power and privilege. Recently, I had an experience that allowed me to get a feel for what it felt like to sit in the majority position and enjoy the power and privilege that comes along with that. For Hurricane Florence, I went to Prince George County, Maryland, to stay with my cousin, and I was there for 10 days. In the first 2 or 3 days, it was amazing to me. I only saw black people. Everywhere I went, there was only black people, because Prince George County is known for having the richest population of blacks in America today. And so while I was there, at first that felt weird. Everywhere I went, to the Wegmans, to the Costco, to the gas station, to riding through beautiful, affluent neighborhoods, everybody looked like me. And yes, in the beginning, it was weird. But then there was a connectedness that I felt. A connectedness with being around people that were all about me, like me. And I never had to think about my blackness. It was never a consideration. I began to settle into the ease and the enjoyment of being in the majority position and operating, and the power and privilege was sitting in that space of operating with people who were all like me. I never thought about any other type of people. In 10 days, I forgot about other people. I became comfortable in the skin I was in. I became comfortable in that majority position and the power and the privilege that comes with it. And then I thought to myself, if in 10 days I found that there was no reason for me to even think about inclusion, I started thinking about, and I began to imagine, what must it be like in a town like Wilmington, when the majority in Wilmington, and to sit in that seat of the majority in Wilmington? With blacks being such a small population and a small minority in our community, I realized, just like I didn't think about other people, there's no reason for us to be considered in this town as such a small minority. And I realized for certain, if the majority in Wilmington is not intentionally inclusive, blacks will be forgotten and left out. We can't do all the hard work of including ourselves when you sit in such a small seat of the minority. We need the help of the majority. And this is what that looks like. For this event, there were table hosts, correct? And so as a table host, you sit in the position to be able to invite whomever you like to come to sit at your table with you. You have the power and the privilege to invite whomever you like. Were you intentionally inclusive? Let me tell you about an experience I had last year. I was invited to the economic scorecard breakfast by one of the table hosts. This year, that same table host invited me and another black female to sit at her table. That's Lindsay Smith with Green Resources being intentionally inclusive, using the power of her position and the privilege that comes with it to be intentionally inclusive. The bottom line is, anytime you sit in the position of the majority, I ask that you be intentionally inclusive in how you disperse your power and your privilege. If each of us does our part, the burden doesn't fall on one person or one segment of people. I know work is required. Work will be required for intentional inclusion to become a part of the fabric of our community. Work will be required for intentional inclusion to become a part of who we are. And I don't propose that being intentionally inclusive is going to change things overnight. But what I do propose is that being intentionally inclusive is a good start. Let's look at Natalie English. When Natalie came to town and took over as CEO and president of the Chamber of Commerce, Natalie recognized that there was a gap in African American participation. And Natalie, being intentionally inclusive, used the power and privilege that came with her majority position, and she asked me to chair the African American Business Council. So that's Natalie being intentionally inclusive. My ask is that each of you do the same thing and leave here today dedicated to being intentionally inclusive. Here's some examples of how simple it is. Who can you invite? This week alone, who can you invite to lunch that will make your lunch more intentionally inclusive? Who can you invite to your garden club, your book club, your social events, to your next business meeting to make it more intentionally inclusive? Who can you invite to go to dinner? Or better yet, invite in your home to dinner to make it more intentionally inclusive? Look around the room today. Who can you invite to this event to make this event more intentionally inclusive? It's that simple. Intentional inclusion is a personal decision. It is very personal. I'm not asking you to go back to your offices and start a revolution. I'm not asking you to start the next movement. I'm asking you to make the personal decision to be intentionally inclusive. And I do believe if each of us commit to intentional inclusion, we can one day create that Wilmington that my sons will actually want to live, work, grow, and raise a family, and make my dream come true. So again, I say, commit to intentional inclusion and have a wonderful holiday season.